This is Broadcast Beat Magazine with Ryan Salazar.
Ryan Salazar here with Broadcast Beat Magazine. We've got a special guest, Stan Szymanski. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing good. How you doing, Ryan?
Doing great. So you own Stanley Vision. Tell us about Stanley Vision and how you got started.
Sure. Yeah, Stanley Vision started probably around 2009. I formed it after I left Sony Pictures ImageWorks. I was there for almost 14 years. I was their senior vice president of creative resources and digital production. And when I left the studio in 2009, I thought, I was interested in working for myself. And I had done quite a bit of work of, connecting and working with senior level creative, technical, production, and facility management personnel. And I wanted to continue to work with them directly and felt it was probably best to start off on my own, start up Stanley Vision, and be able to work directly with the talent and work with companies with them as my clients as opposed to being my boss.
You've been in this business a long time, right?
Yeah, pretty much. It's almost 30 years. 30 years in the field of computer graphics and 20 years in visual effects for commercials, television, film, animation, and now digital media. And as a friend of mine in Los Angeles called it, the VR gold rush.
So you're working with facilities, I assume, worldwide, right?
Pretty much, yeah. My schedule is all over the map. Our clients at any given point in time could be in Beijing, Shanghai, Wellington, New Zealand, Melbourne, Australia, Sofia, Bulgaria, London, New York, Montreal, Vancouver, Los Angeles, San Francisco. It pretty much runs the gamut. So if you don't watch it, your schedule can be 24/7 quite easily.
Your client base is mostly motion picture industry. Do you have some post and broadcast in there as well?
The client base is primarily motion pictures, visual effects, and animation studios. But lately, we've noticed that the business model is changing slightly, and some of our recent and current clients include hardware manufacturers that are servicing the growing virtual reality industry, as well as companies that are working on more episodic television, although we have worked in the commercial post-production sphere as well, doing work for companies like MPC's commercial division, as well as the Mill, companies along those lines.
If I'm a company that wants to utilize your services to find employees, how do we approach you and how do we deal with you? And then if you're an actual person looking to get a gig through you, how does that work?
Yeah, it's actually quite simple, and the two are very much related. I guess my answer would be the same to both questions, which is, be present and engaged and be prepared to enter into a partnership and effective series of communication, which in the very simplest terms is if you're a company and you're asking us to help you find senior level, creative, technical, et cetera, type personnel, as we put candidates in front of you and ask your opinion on the suitability of these candidates, get back to us as quickly as possible and not only give us yes, no, maybes, but also give us reasons for yes, reasons for no. And just the faster a company can turn information around and enter into a dialogue, the more effective we can be. If we're contacting you on behalf of a company, just respond back to us as quickly as possible. If you're not available or not interested, please let us know. If you're not available, but it's because you're on a project for 6 months, let us know that as well, because we record that information and we keep it in our database. And when a future client down the road hires us to work on, a kick butt project in some part of the world, we go back through our database and we look to see who's available and who's coming available. So the answer is really just be prepared to enter into a dialogue and respond to questions as quickly as possible.
And I've noticed, at least in the motion picture industry, it seems to be a little transient as far as folks like artists and whatever. They're moving from film to film, and some of them are moving from one end of the world to the other for these projects. Is that right?
Yeah, that's very true, Ryan. Actually, at Sony, at ImageWorks, my job was to staff the company, and we were always bringing artists from many different parts of the globe. I would design and lead recruiting efforts that would occur in, Wellington, New Zealand, and Sydney, Australia, and London, and Toronto, and New York. We are constantly going out, doing the sort of traveling roadshow and talking to artists, and talking to them about the company and the project, and looking to bring them in to Southern California to work. Since working with Stanley Vision, what I now do is I primarily work with clients who are in places like Shanghai and Beijing and Melbourne, who are staffing up and looking for me to bring people to them. So our job is basically to find them the best possible talent out there and help them connect with a company and a project, which often means relocating to a different area. Sometimes it could be for just the run of a production. Sometimes it could be for a term. 12 months seems to be pretty typical. And in many cases, if a company is in a new location and they're building up, in many cases, a Beijing company would love to have you join them on a permanent basis, but they realize that's not always possible. So they're willing to get as much out of you as they possibly can.
Very cool. And so as far as trends in the industry, at least in digital media production, what are you seeing these days? The whole industry has evolved, especially over the last 10, 15 years.
Yeah, it's very much evolved, and it's continuing to evolve. I guess right now, probably the biggest trends that I'm seeing is if you're looking at the advertising sphere, which the typical ad agency model has been, sort of merging with the post-production model, and you're seeing more and more agencies start post divisions and start to bring a lot of the post capacity in house. Saatchi and Saatchi were some of the first people to do that. Deutsch in Los Angeles had a big internal post production capacity, and now I'm starting to see post production facilities also go in the opposite direction and and create creative groups within the company that are actually designing and creating creative. So the post houses are starting to act a little bit more like an agency and a production company. Production companies are acting more like post houses and agencies. Agencies are acting like post-production companies. So in that, you're seeing that kind of merger of all what used to be different business models. In film, I'm seeing the merger of different types of media and entertainment coming out of one single source of IP. So what used to be just a one-off film and then expanded out in the 90s and the 2000s to be a film and a game is now a film and a game and a virtual reality experience and a Snapchat application and, a Kim Kardashian website holding your product. It's all really starting to blur together. So I'm also noticing that episodic TV and episodic entertainment, where it used to be just network and then expanded out to network and cable, is now network and cable and Netflix and Amazon. And now you could layer in on top of that mobile entertainment, where intellectual property is being streamed on mobile devices. And that's much bigger in China and the Orient, but it's coming our way as well. So we're starting to see that with episodic. And then with virtual reality, that's kind of the banner that a lot of companies are going for, and that's really starting to blend hardware and software and IP. So there's a lot of kind of merging and blending going on in the industry right now, and some of it is pretty easy to see where it's going to go. Episodic TV, it's pretty easy to see where that's going. In terms of virtual reality and the blend of hardware and software, it's a little bit, I'm still studying it because I'm really fascinated to see what's going to come out of that market. And I've always been a big fan of storytelling and visual storytelling and film history and cinema history. I've actually lectured on it quite a bit. So I'm really curious to see how cinema language, which has really been in existence for almost an entire century, how that stuff is going to alter and change in the VR sphere.
As the production industry has evolved over the last 15 years or so, when it's gone from tape-based facilities to file-based facilities, I'm sure in the motion picture industry you've seen a lot of the same thing, especially when it comes to finding staff. So when you're recruiting for people, I'm sure their capabilities is evolving, obviously, with the times, right?
Yes, very much so. And, some of the trickier ones are definitely in the technology sphere. We have some searches going on right now that on the high end are CTO type candidates and then flow through pipeline and workflow architect candidates. So pretty much the whole spectrum. And when you're looking for those kind of candidates, really depending on what company is hiring them, you start to look at people that are coming out of that sphere. But now we're also looking people coming out of broadcast and telecom and mobile apps. And, there's a lot of different applications and skill sets that are transferable from one industry to another. So for us, it's constantly, staying in touch with candidates, staying in touch with our, fellow recruiters, and also networking and talking a lot to companies and company heads to kind of find out what's trending, what's new, what's going on. But on a simpler level, Ryan, when a client approaches us and say, hey, we're looking for a workflow architect, our job is to really work with the client and find out exactly what they're looking for. And it's not just give us a job description. It's give us a job description, tell us who the team is, what are their scope of responsibilities, what projects are they going to be working on, what type of projects would they have worked on in the past. We like to be very creative in who we seek. Anybody can just search a database. We like to actually use the art and our experience to sort of combine the experience and the abilities of people from maybe different industries that could be applicants for a company that many recruiters might overlook.
If you don't mind, if you could, you've been involved in a lot of major motion picture films and stuff. Would you mind? Are you able to divulge some of those?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I think the first couple of films I worked on, and I'll try to be brief, Ryan. The first couple of films I worked on, ironically, were films that were being done out of post-production facilities, and that's going back to the 90s. The first one was a project called Virtuosity, where I worked for the director, Brett Leonard. I worked for his company, and I was stationed in a post-production facility and supervising a lot of the visual effects on that project. The second film project I worked on was a little project called Independence Day, and I was also working out of a post-production facility. I was the director of operations for the film group. So, I worked on those two films. And then after Independence Day wrapped up, it was one of those situations where, I worked on a film that wound up just capturing the public's imagination and being a very big hit. And in Hollywood, if the film is a hit, then so are you. So I was able to parlay that into a vice president position at Sony ImageWorks. And at ImageWorks, when I joined there in '96, they're in a big growth spurt and reimagining the company. It was the ILM invasion had occurred, and people like five-time Oscar winner Ken Ralston had joined and brought along with him director Robert Zemeckis. Ken Ralston had worked with Robert Zemeckis on projects like Forrest Gump, Death Becomes Her, and Roger Rabbit. And when Ken joined the company, and then when I came in, we were working on projects like Contact and Castaway and What Lies Beneath. We were also doing projects like Starship Troopers. And then when Tim Sarnoff, who was my boss at ImageWorks for a number of years, he helped to reimagine ImageWorks as a studio that was doing photoreal performance-based animation of digital characters in live-action settings. And that's when ImageWorks really kind of reinvented itself and started doing projects like Hollow Man and Spider-Man and Stuart Little and The Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe, all of which I was very actively involved in getting those shows up and running, getting them staffed, getting them crewed, supervising all the artists who were working on the shows. So that was kind of during my ImageWorks days. During the ImageWorks period, we had 16 Oscar nominations and 2 Oscars, one for visual effects for Spider-Man 2, one for animated short subject for a project called The Chub Chubs, which actually was the genesis for Sony Pictures Animation. And ImageWorks was also for many years the only studio to ever be nominated for Oscars for visual effects for Superman Returns and for animated feature for Surf's Up. So after leaving ImageWorks, I started working as a consultant and also as a recruiter. And in that capacity, I've touched many, many projects. It's probably too many to mention. The most current projects, I guess, we have an ongoing relationship with MPC and Technicolor. They've been our clients pretty much since 2009. And if you look at Technicolor's body of work, some of their more recent films coming out include Goosebumps, which is just coming out, The Martian. Those projects were all done by by MPC, and we played quite a big hand in helping to staff up their senior level production, creative, and technology management teams.
Thank you so much for spending your time with us. Chief Resource Strategist and founder of Stanley Vision, Stan Szymanski. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Ryan. It was great talking to you, and thanks for giving me this opportunity to chat with you and your audience.